Hello and thank you so much for joining us on this week's presentation of News in Depth. I am your presenter, Pennifa Nyirenda. On today's program, we look at anthrax, an old disease which has been with mankind for ages. In Zambia, anthrax is endemic in Western Province, but over the years it has been spreading to different parts of the country. On today's edition of News in Depth, Effie Mphande looks at measures being put in place to prevent recurrence of anthrax in traditional communities where it is endemic. And she'll also be profiling a Nalolo resident who contracted anthrax after eating contaminated meat. Join us for more right here on News in Depth.
It has been dubbed one of the most notorious diseases and bioweapons of modern times. Anthrax is a life-threatening infectious disease. Bacillus anthracis is a rare bacterium and if found in human beings or animals can have devastating effects. The bacterium forms spores that can lie dormant in extremely harsh conditions, reactivating when they are inhaled, ingested or come into contact with a skin lesion.
Anthrax is an infectious disease characterized by fever, and it is caused by a germ known as Bacillus anthracis. It affects literally all warm-blooded animals, including man.
An animal or human can become infected if they breathe in the spores, eat tainted food, or even pick up spores through an open wound. Without prompt treatment, experts say death can come quickly.
Anthrax bacteria has two states of survival. There is a state where it lies dormant in the environment, in the soil. It will lie dormant for even over 150 years. It will be lying dormant. But when certain systems activate it, it grows with a lot of force. It's like something that is in a pressure cooker, and you release the pressure. It just goes just like that. And that's the way anthrax grows. So from its dormant stage, in this case, if one particle of anthrax, that dormant state, is introduced in my body, that pressure which was contained in its dormant state just opens up. So which means within the shortest possible time, within 4 or 5 hours, that one particle, there will be over 1 million. So which means in my body, after 5 or 6 hours, the whole body will have this bacteria. So this is why terrorists or unscrupulous people would actually want to use it as a biological weapon. Because within the shortest possible time, it will overwhelm the body and the body will give up, and that's the end.
But the disease has a surprisingly long history. Anthrax has been known since ancient times. Some historians believe the disease was present in the pharaonic Egypt and may have been behind the 5th or the 10 plagues mentioned in the Bible. In Zambia, the first documented outbreak of anthrax was in 1989 in Western Province. Scientists believe it could have been the same time the first case occurred in humans.
Usually animals that graze are the most animals that are involved in the transmission of anthrax. So basically what will happen is that when these animals are grazing on the ground, they will actually inhale the spores. After they have inhaled the spores, those spores, which is the dormant state, it may directly go into the lungs, or it will directly go into the stomach, and then find its way into the bloodstream. In the bloodstream, it will actually start now affecting all the vital organs, and it will multiply. Then within the shortest possible time, if it's in an animal, the animal will go down within the period of 12 to 24 hours. The animal will go down. And when the animal goes down, it will die. Going back to the soil, it sleeps. Now, where does man come into being? Man comes in as a person who takes care of these animals and wants to eat them. So if the cattle dies, this man goes, because we all want meat, eats the meat. It means the cycle now goes into the human population.
This now is the story of Lubasi Namangolwa. This is where Lubasi lived with his family. Lubasi died from anthrax on 26 October 2017 in Nalolo district. A month later, Lubasi's house was razed down. His aunt Musiwana Lubinda, who showed me where his house used to be, told me that the family razed it down in a bid to simultaneously erase the unpleasant memories.
Chwala solo ferize kucha, kona solo bona kuli, solo kala kweza tutombo. Yoyo mumu yashwile, na tilo kulanga katombo mwali wafa. Chwala ina kwali hutu, ni baba mchwalo. Nolinzi mwendilo wa 5. Chwala litulaka neli luluila holo. Nikamwana nacho napenda kaluluila lulizo. Nolile kwa sipatila. Kuna kulisabelo fafela miliani. Miliani yose luto inuanga. Onoli hutu neli saa kutela na cholo kukula. Kuna kulise kutaba mota wasawatuli ya mchile komu ya lupete. Kuna kulibatu ba mubafe lindonga. Kuna mwana barofe lindonga ze 5 kumutuni mutu.
Under the Lozi custom, when a husband dies, the widow goes back to live with her parents. But if her children are older, she stays with her in-laws. Lubinda's widow, Namakao Mushimbei, was made to leave a week after her husband died. This is a tradition that has been practiced for decades in rural parts of Western Province. Later, Namakao will be asked if she would want to grow food for her children at her in-laws' place. With her relocation to Shangombo district and left with 2 young children, Namakao is still trying to come to terms with what happened.
Namatoka la fela mazivana na kuyachua na kutina utavu tukumwenge siputesi watakunitela. Yani chase walo boneni kwa teni hasabatu apula mwali kapa kutotalima senilia hakuna sipute satumbanga kambe kisipute kambe saizi sakalo mwendi kikukula fela mwendi muntu akabutuku mwali ni kwa monsolo kuzeza fokandi niyo mitova kwa niba futumaleza miziki obatoba mazibwa na basakona chweni nikuza masabatiera khalieta laka seli kuza kwa usho kolobala senia mfetwele kwa rufetu sezanga kwali to selio anafoka moni ambolezi nibona mwala abusiuma 03 batonisia.
According to the Ministry of Fisheries and Livestock, 1,626 cases of suspected animal anthrax were reported between 1989 and 1995, but only 51 were confirmed cases of anthrax. Official statistics indicate that an outbreak with 220 cases of human anthrax also occurred with a case fatality of 19.1% and another with 248 human cases with a case fatality of 7.7% in 1991. In 2011, the outbreak of anthrax resulted in 233 suspected human cases with 6 deaths and about 80 hippos dying. Hardly a year passes by without hearing stories of anthrax. Since then, anthrax has become endemic in Western Province.
Of late, it has moved to other districts, mainly due to human beings' contact with animal byproducts and movement of these carcasses they use. And by so doing, we are finding that the disease is going from one district to another, away from the traditional endemic areas, which are Kalao and Mongo in Western Province. Those were places that traditionally were focal areas for the disease outbreaks, and also in Chama, in Wangwa Game Park. Those are traditional areas. But even in Chama last time, we had the disease spreading to the north.
The current outbreak of anthrax occurred in Nalolo district in Western Province. Authorities here are not leaving anything to chance. Dr. Chisanga Mwamba is the district veterinary officer in Nalolo and starts vaccinating cattle against anthrax at 7 o'clock every morning. Vaccinations run throughout the day depending on how soon farmers take their cattle to the kraal. If farmers take their cattle early, veterinary doctors finish the vaccination exercise by lunchtime, and the afternoon is used to put the records together.
Kangalweti is what we consider to be endemic to anthrax. So, meaning that every year, if we don't vaccinate in that area, we expect, to get cases in that area. So during the January vaccination, we only vaccinated Kangalweti veterinary camp because that is the area that is considered at high risk. Now, these latest cases, they emerged from a different area, an area where we haven't had anthrax in a long time. Maybe in over 5 years, we haven't had reports of anthrax there. And that's in Liliachi and Sinungu veterinary camp.
Sililo Lubinda is a farmer and has so far lost 3 of his cattle to anthrax. In his native language, anthrax is known as lubete.
Solubona kuisolosaba butuku bwa anthrax kulikandibwa wavulaya maneni nako yaluizichwa nakubona ko mwaishwa lunani kuipumpe kakapa kuchisa kusababona butuku bo mwendikona monizivela bona butuku bwa anthrax kono chwele lunaba baliteni koliko mukafa lunalo uzibangi kulifa komu yekula anthrax kiyechwa likapo kiyechwa kaibonanga kako yashwa kona kuli kwanda kuliva muso balubone molukona kuipilisa dafaliko mzalona kulilusika lwakenela kubutata.
Even in Senanga, many here did not know what was going on. Headman Sakalui shares his experience.
Diko mzalu nalikalile kushwa lubwani pela komuyeshwa. Then nilusikale assessing selunga komuyani kucha. Chwa selu chile solutobona kulimanana wakala kukula selibali tombo. Selumata kuya kwa sipatela kuzibisa ba health. Sebata kutotatuba babuni kulikomuza nzelu chile nina ni butuku bwa anthrax. Chole kama ubebebebe sebabiha kwa district. Sebayota haba district kutotalima nikubula kuli anamaika bi maipumbeka. Mi api mube ni silelo za kutabanga likomuze. Amugali tuwelela fela chwalo peto butuku bokayamba kwa likomu ni kwa batu kaofela. Kakuli butuku bo butisi wakili komu. Kada kuyani buchwanya bubanga bo winyani. Peto butuku wani wakala. Chwekona kuli July, August, ni September chwa mswalia kusilele za likomu. Mi api kwa tusehande kuli makona kubiza ba veterinary neba mutuyana nikawani kwacha peto bata bato mitawela likomu zamina.
Anthrax is most common in wildlife and domestic animals like cattle, goats, sheep and camels, among others. Western Province Veterinary Officer Wilfred Tembo now explains what farmers should look out for.
It's very difficult for one to see the signs because in most cases you find the animal is already dead. Actually, the ruminant animals like the sheep, goats and cattle are very, very susceptible to the disease. But should you have a chance to see these signs, mostly maybe clinical, you find, like I mentioned, it's a febrile disease, which means the temperature will be very high. It can even go up to 41 degrees Celsius. But would be lucky to see that, to see a sick animal. So mostly it is characterized by sudden death. You find the animal has already died, and when it has died, what you see is the blood which does not clot. It oozes from the natural orifices, the ears, the mouth and stuff. And there's also rapid ballooning due to rapid decomposition. And they also have to mention that blood which comes out from the natural body openings is dark and it does not clot.
The carcass of animals that die of anthrax are very dangerous to people and other animals. They are also dangerous to the environment. Dr. Tembo now explains how carcasses should be taken care of.
It's not advisable to open the carcass. All you have to do is dispose. If farmers come across this condition, they report to veterinary officials who are going to advise on how the carcass can be disposed of. But the common methods of disposal, there are two. You can either incinerate the carcass if you have got the means to do so, or you can bury the carcass 2 meters, minimum 2 meters below the ground, and then you cover it with lime.
This is a high level 3 laboratory at the University of Zambia School of Veterinary Medicine where final tests are done. Whichever expert goes in has to ensure that she or he is 100% protected. This man is preparing to go inside and handle infectious bacteria. All the air leaving this laboratory is filtered so that the environment is not contaminated with anthrax spores. Professor Bernard Hangombe has been researching on anthrax for 20 years.
We have actually found that this anthrax is not the same anthrax. For example, in 2010, 2011, we had an outbreak in the Lower Zambezi. At the same time that year, it was a coincidence, we had an outbreak in Chama, and then the following year we had some outbreaks in Western Province. So the strains that we found in Lower Zambezi were different from the strains that we found in Chama. And we were able to establish this difference when we actually looked at how sensitive they are to antibiotics.
The Zambian National Public Health Institute was created in 2015. And in today's world, the role of the institute is more important than ever before.
The second mandate for the institute is to respond, first to prepare and be able to respond to any of the emergencies, outbreaks, so all the threats and hazards in the country. So one of the key functions is to do the mapping of the risks and then put in the control measures. So for any of the outbreaks, we have the command structure here, the Emergency Operations Center, which is there to save and mobilize and ensure that any of the outbreaks, the disease outbreaks, are brought to control and the necessary mitigations done.
In November 2017, a team of experts from the Zambia National Public Health Institute and local veterinary doctors sensitized rural communities against eating meat whose source is not known. The team was also in the province to assess the outbreak of anthrax. Dr. Fred Kapaya was leading the team.
We were sent here to come and work with the teams, and I can assure you we've gone around Western Province, and what we have noticed is that there are very good programs on the ground, and our department health, our health facilities have maintained active surveillance for anthrax, so we are picking all the cases and we are able to report in real time. And then at the same time, measures have been put in place for all those that have contracted the disease can go to the health facilities where they will receive quality and appropriate treatment.
Access to health facilities is still a huge challenge in some rural parts of Zambia. But somehow, Musiwana Lubinda managed to get to the local clinic in good time. 5 of her family members had anthrax and she's recovering from the disease.
Nekuizikwa teni tuzazi chwele sentofu mana kuli fali hutula kafa kwaeza ngefo kumomokile kona chwele nitokumbuka sukukala kuyuwanga li hutuka fila sikala kuyuwanga sukutaka kweza ngefo kusuchwana kuna munini sikwasipatila.
Memories of Lubasina Mangolwa's death are still fresh in Nalolo.
Na shweziona kwanukwa hai bakensa kuli na asikazi bakuli hutukubwa kula kingi. In
human beings, anthrax comes in different forms. Dr. Kapaya and Dr. Jacob Sakala now look at the types of anthrax.
So anthrax usually would manifest in 3 forms. There is what we call a cutaneous form, which is mainly a skin manifestation. There's also a pulmonary manifestation which affects the lungs. And there's an intestinal manifestation that would present with abdominal signs and symptoms. So for the skin, usually what an infected person would see anthrax would start as a small blister with swelling around it. Eventually that blister would be a painless ulcer with a black center and swelling around it.
The third type is called respiratory type of anthrax. Now this one, usually you get this type of anthrax when you breathe in the spores from the environment. It tends to be common in people that work in wool industries when they are dealing with wool, and also in our setting when you are working with animal skin. For example, people that make drums, we beat drums according to our tradition in Zambia, and during that period spores are released and people breathe in.
During my visit to Western Province, I was keen on finding out how the local people dispose domestic animals that died on their own. Headman Sakalui had the answer.
Kwa kale nerusazi biruna nerubuwa ngafela kucha nerusazi bi neruli mwendiki nyoko kapa kimaswafu kapa kikucha fela chwele fai kale ruzi bakuli kunani butuku mateni.
5 districts in Western Province had an outbreak of anthrax, with Nalolo recording the highest number of human cases. In the current outbreak of anthrax, 39 human cases were recorded. As of November 2017, Senanga had 13 cases of anthrax in human beings. But in Kalonga village, at least only 2 people suffered from anthrax after they ate meat which they got from relatives who live in a nearby village. One of them is an 8-year-old boy.
Nensa izibi nkwiziba kwa kaisi mwana kyato kala kutokula basipate aseba tolutolokera uti butukubo ki anthrax kena niba niliselera kuziba uti kandikibona butukubo.
Throughout history, humans have existed side by side with bacteria and viruses. They have evolved to resist them, but in response, the bacteria and viruses have developed new ways of infecting humans. Humans have had antibiotics for almost a century, ever since Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. The battle is simply endless.
These microorganisms, a lot of them are no longer responding to antibiotics because most scientists, us in the scientific community, after the development of these antibiotics, we went to sleep because we thought that we had won the war against bacteria. But the last animal that will remain standing on this planet, if it's destroyed, are bacteria organisms.
Zambia has been struggling with anthrax for more than 2 decades. What measures are being put in place to put the disease under control?
When the disease occurs, we move in for emergency disease outbreaks because we produce our own vaccine at Central Veterinary Research. We've got the capacity to produce as much as possible. But we're also looking at how can we come in and assist the farmers, maybe reschedule the mode of intervening in the disease outbreak, because now it's growing. The occurrences is the outbreaks among the people is increasing. The number affected is increasing. So we're also getting worried as government. So we wanted to intervene through our officers to see how we can help our farmers identify areas that can be intervened at the right time and vaccinate as a prophylactic measure and contain them. Then we also want to see that we promote and strengthen the checkpoints countrywide.
Western Province has an estimated population of 760,832 cattle. But only about 5% of the total cattle population is vaccinated annually. According to the Ministry of Fisheries and Livestock, 41,190 cattle were vaccinated in 2017. This is only 5.4% of the total cattle population vaccinated against anthrax. This in itself is a hurdle in controlling the disease. But what challenges do farmers and government face in vaccinating domestic animals?
Konomani utana ni mata kuli usakupa katusolo ya kuli akulata muliani o vaccine waluvete ningongola akulata watula lonama akulata lonama shere nyandi lokota kuleka kona buma ifa wolunani apino buma wa yena yo wa veti olunani yena kwanu peto kuti kufumanele kuli asaini kwanu nduyaye kuti ishwile kona upaki kwa lufanga kona kuli lufumana utata kwa likomwa kuli esi kumulizeza nga kwa sinanga katufumana nga komu ishwile kona buma yape uliteni yape kwanu kuluna kwa kaunga lweti kwanu.
Some farmers are not responsive to our cause that they have to adhere to the vaccination calendar, but they would wait until when they have the disease. That's when now they start, running, for the looking for the vaccine.
Under the Animal Health Act of 2010, the farmers are obliged to ensure that the animals are vaccinated against anthrax. This is by law, and if they fail to do that, they can be prosecuted. To encourage our farmers to vaccinate their animals. Similarly, if they do that, they'll help us to control the disease.
With one person dead from anthrax, many here are now cautious on the source of meat they eat.
Nabalwanisize ku lusike lwa changa kona kulifa abantu basaba ku changa ishwezi.
Experts had many things to say about anthrax.
Anthrax is a dangerous disease, but it's very easy to control. As I said, the first one you have to vaccinate, and the vaccine is cheap to make, and it's very easy. The principles of making the vaccine very cheap, very easy. So we should not have anthrax in domestic animals.
Anthrax is a management disease. What it means is that it's the onus is up to the farmer, the owner of the animals, to get the animal vaccinated. Our job as the veterinary department is to give them as much information and facilitate the vaccination exercise. But the payment for the vaccine has to come from the farmer. So we have a vaccination schedule as a department, which we distribute to farmers. And ideally, farmers should vaccinate their animals against anthrax and many other diseases in the period of April to June.
The message I am giving, I think, is for those with the animals to work very closely with the Department of Livestock and Veterinary Services to ensure the animals are vaccinated, protected. Secondly, also the appeal to the public, I think, to ensure that we don't consume animals which die from any form of disease, because such disease, some of the diseases can be transmitted to the human beings. And the third, I think, is for those not feeling well to quickly visit our nearest health facility.
We know we can contain the disease with full participation of our farmers, and we know our farmers are very good and very hardworking. They respond very well. We want just to encourage them to do more. And as I speak now, we are doing livestock census for the first time in many years. They should come forward, cooperate with our officers in the field and give the right numbers so that we are able to plan properly.
Anthrax is a life-threatening disease, and experts advise that farmers should have their domestic animals vaccinated annually. Meat whose source is not known should also be avoided at all costs.
This is where we conclude this week's presentation of News in Depth, where Effie Mphande has been looking at measures being put in place to prevent the recurrence of anthrax in traditional communities where it is endemic. We do hope that you found the program informative. Join us next week at the very same time for yet another presentation of News in Depth. I've been your host, Penny Nyirenda, saying goodbye and God bless you.